Okay, folks, before we start, let me just tell you how the news conference will go, so you're all prepared for it. First, let me introduce everybody who's here. To my immediate left is Shauna Kerlin, who is the ACLU cooperating attorney on this matter. Next to her is Tico Johnson, the mother of Treasurer Johnson, who is right next to her, who this is all about. What we'll do is I'm going to make a few very short preliminary comments, and then we're going to go down the line, have people make some brief comments, and once everybody's done, we'll open it up to questions. And we'll be sure to stop between each person so we can move all the microphones for you. And I'd ask that you hold off any questions until the end. Thank you all for coming here today. As you know, today we are celebrating the birthday of Martin Luther King. We will hear lots of speeches today and all this week from public officials about all the progress that's been made in terms of racial equality, but how much more there is that still needs to be done. In school, the students will be taught about Martin Luther King's legacy, but what will be left unsaid is the role that the schools themselves are playing in driving what is a relatively new form of racial inequality called the school-to-prison pipeline. As this case, we think, amply demonstrates, schools and police departments are collaborating all too often in criminalizing the normal behavior of young people, treating them like criminals, handcuffing them, arresting them, holding them in prison cells, does absolutely nothing to promote public safety, does nothing to promote children and the school role, and we're hopeful that this case will help make a dent in this increasingly common conduct that has no place in our public schools. With that, I will turn it over to Shauna Kerlin, the attorney who's handling this matter for us.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the ACLU. Actually, my first civil case as a new attorney was as a cooperating attorney with the ACLU. So it's important to recognize how much they're building the infrastructure for civil rights, for reclaiming our civil rights. And at PRISM, the organization I work for, Providence Youth and Student Movement, is proud to be a part of the ACLU's efforts in this. Most of all, I would like to thank Tico Johnson and Treasurer Johnson. I am honored to be working with both of you. Folks can only imagine how hard it is to stand up and talk about something that's so painful that's happened, that's so frustrating and potentially angering, but it is so necessary to do that, to do what both of these women are doing. And we can only hope that that will lead to making it just a little bit easier for more students and more parents to speak out. I'll just explain to you a little bit about where we're at in this process. Rhode Island law requires what's called a notice of claim to be sent to a city or town when you're going to file a lawsuit against them and when you're going to claim damages. So this is a letter that we send to them, that we are sending to them today. And in that letter, we explain just a little summary of what happened, and also point out that this, we believe, demonstrates violations of Treasurer's rights under the Fourth Amendment, potentially the Equal Protection Clause in terms of differential or disparate impacts affecting particularly black students. There's clear violations of more than one state law, both in terms of the arrest itself, in terms of the department providing the opportunity, the school providing the opportunity for the officer to question Treasurer without consulting her mother first. And there's violations of the school department's policy. For example, that student resource officers are not meant to be disciplinarians in the schools. In the letter, we also point out that while we are seeking damages for the harm that was done to Treasurer, that we want to see some changes. That those changes we want to see in a solid form that can be guaranteed, and protections that can be guaranteed by the courts. in an effort to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else. And finally, I'd just like to close by acknowledging what Steve said, that today is the day we celebrate Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And as we think back on some of the things that were happening during the struggle that he was such a vital part of, we have the images of a little girl, a little black girl named Ruby Bridges, who was escorted into school by law enforcement officers. How sad. How sad that today, not only have we not come farther, but in some ways we've moved back by the fact that now we see a black girl being escorted out of the school by law enforcement officers. And with that, I'm very honored to next hear from Tico Johnson, Treasure's mother.
I would like to thank...
Oh, hold on. Just a second.
Sorry.
That's good.
So I would like to thank everyone for coming, because as a parent, no one had, you don't have any idea how hard this was, not only for my child, but for me, because this is much bigger than my daughter. This is happening to more kids than just my child. And as parents, we hope to protect our children, but you would never think that we're supposed to be protecting them from the people that's supposed to be protecting us. So SROs are supposed to be put into the school for support and protection of our children, not to intimidate or put fear in them. It's having the opposite effect. So, like Stephen had said, to me, it brings it back to school, the prison pipeline. Our kids go to school to learn. There's things you would never think that, they're getting treated like criminals, which is actually happening. They're teaching, the school department thinks that by having SROs, it's going to have a positive effect, but really it could have a negative effect. This situation that happened to my child could happen to someone else, and it could have an opposite effect, not make the student not like school anymore, make them think that their life is not worth anything, turn them into a criminal as opposed to turning them into a future police officer. There's a lot of things. My family has been affected in so many different ways. My child went from going to not wanting to go anywhere, to not wanting to talk to people. Every time she sees a police officer, she thinks she's going to be arrested. And that's not the case. She should see one and feel safe, and not the opposite effect. So, like I said, this is difficult, but it's bigger than just us. I want people to be aware that, to change the policy is my ultimate goal. Because I don't want students to deal with what my daughter's dealing with, and I don't want parents to be put in an awkward position like I'm put in. Do you want to speak? No? So this is like a sensitive subject for my child. We came here with the intentions of, her speaking, but I don't know exactly how that's gonna go.
Okay, why don't we open it up to questions? And if Treasurer, if you want to say anything later on, that'll be fine, okay? But you don't have to.
Can you describe the incident? What happened?
So it was a argument over the weekend between students, and then when they returned to school on Monday, it was an altercation between my child and another student that was broken up quickly by other students, and the problem, and then they got brought into the office, from my understanding. When the school called, I arrived immediately, and the situation was already over, so I couldn't understand as the parent what was happening exactly.
So you're saying there was an altercation, your daughter was escorted out?
She was escorted into the building.
The altercation took place before school had started.
Okay.
And then, can you talk us through when you got there, what you saw happen?
So when I got there, my child was in the guidance office with the guidance counselor. and the assistant principal met me downstairs, because the way the school is set up, you come in downstairs and the office is on the second floor. So you have to kind of walk through the building to get in and out the building. And she was saying, oh, my child got into an altercation. So when I first got there, she was crying. So I'm like, are you okay? What happened? And the principal immediately is like, oh, it's her fault, this and that. I said, was you there? And she said, no. Okay, so then how do you know it was her fault? Let her speak. Let her tell me what happened. And she said, oh, but I watched the video. So I'm like, okay. But how does the video determine what actually happened if you wasn't there? And my daughter went on to explain what happened. And I'm like, okay, so what's gonna happen? She's gonna be suspended. But then the principal, the SRO comes in. Oh, she's gonna be like saying that basically they was placing the blame that it was my daughter's fault. And I'm like, well, was you there? And he said no. So how do you know? How can you base that off of what happened if you wasn't there? And he went on to say, oh, that she was gonna be arrested, which I was confused as the parent, because when I went to school, you get into a little altercation, you get suspended, they call your parent, you go home. She was not uncontrollable. There was no need to be arrested in my eyes, because my child, yes, she was crying, but she wasn't out of control. They didn't need to do anything other. I'm there. I'm the parent at that point. So I'm like, he's like, oh, she's going to be arrested. So I'm like, why? Why does she need to be arrested? Isn't she going to be suspended? So he's like, oh, she needs to be arrested. He was going to make an example. Well, why would you want to make an example out of a child who never got in trouble? She never been suspended before. To me, I couldn't understand that fact. But okay, at the end, and I'm like, who makes that decision? And he said he did. It was up to him what was going to be done. How is what happens to my child up to you? It should be up to the school. So, he was like, oh, wait, right here. And 2 other police officers came and they wanted to handcuff my child and walk her through the school. No. Where is any of this necessary? There's no need to handcuff her and walk her through the school. She's already under enough humiliation. Getting arrested alone is enough.
Did they end up doing that? Handcuffing?
They didn't, because I was going back and forth with them. And then he said, oh, but he couldn't. He had to handcuff her before he put her in the car. She couldn't get into the car without being handcuffed.
And was that the Pawtucket police?
Pawtucket police, yes.
So they handcuffed her and put her in the car?
Yes.
Okay.
Is she arrested?
She was arrested. Which is interesting, because she was suspended from school also. That's 2 punishments for the same thing. So only suspended from school for 2 days. With 2-day suspension, and that was like the minimum. If it was so serious, why wasn't she suspended the maximum?
And just to emphasize, the altercation was very minor. It was
No
very
one was
brief.
even injured.
No one was injured. And the students themselves resolved it, broke up the altercation. Everything was calm and peaceful before the school officials took any action.
What were the criminal charges?
Disorderly conduct.
And what was the resolution of that? Was there any resolution in court?
The treasurer went in front of the juvenile hearing board, so it was resolved there.
Right.
So let me just ask about what is it you're not suing per se, right?
Well, this is the first step to a lawsuit. Clearly, if the city of Pawtucket wants to fix everything without having to litigate, that's always the preference. Nobody wants to have to go to court. That's a lot for the family to have to go through, and resources to be expended that don't need to be. So this is the notice of claim functions as sort of a warning shot, an opportunity to do the right thing. However, that's up to the city. If they decide not to, then the next step will be filing a lawsuit, and we can do that as soon as the 40 days are expired.
You're claiming a violation of her civil rights.
Yes, violation of her civil rights, along with some very clear violations of state law and school department policy.
State law, such as?
So there's one state law, it's Title 12, Chapter 7, Section 3, that deals with arrest for misdemeanors, and it says that an officer can arrest for a misdemeanor if they have grounds to believe that a person cannot be arrested later which makes no sense. She's going to be at school for the rest of the day and every day thereafter, or may cause injury to himself or herself or others. Again, that wasn't the case because everything was calm and running smoothly well before he made the arrest. So that's one state law they violated. There's also a procedure that schools have to follow for interrogating students, so elementary students, which includes up through 8th grade. And that's Title 16, Chapter 21.5, Section 2. And that's very clear. Before the school makes a student available to law enforcement for questioning, they have to take steps to obtain the oral consent of their parent or guardian. And in this case, Ms. Johnson was already on her way. She was there before things proceeded. And instead, the school created the opportunity for the officer to to question her, but in a form that, from our understanding, was very aggressive, sort of more barking out questions rather than a conversation even.
And as a mother, we hear about suspensions all the time where police aren't involved and the school doesn't contact police. Talk to me why in this case you feel it's different and why they did that.
I don't know. I asked them. For me personally, like I said, my daughter never even got suspended before, but I do have enough, I've known kids to get suspended that've been going to all different districts. I don't know. I don't understand. To me, it was just it was a minor altercation that could have been resolved. Called the parent, suspended for 2 days. When I received the suspension letter, I'm like, 2 days? I would have rather her have been suspended for more days than to be arrested. The school, to me, didn't seem like it was that much of an issue because they would have put the maximum amount of days, which they didn't do because my child's record, the fact that she never got in trouble at school, she was on the honor roll, like all of that played a part in how many days she got, but it didn't play a part in whether to get arrested or not. That doesn't make any sense.
I think
One issue too that may factor in is we've had reports that this particular student resource officer, Darren Rose, had actually made comments to students that he was, one description is he said he was itching to arrest someone, that basically he was looking forward to arresting someone.
One of the other really problematic things about this is that Pawtucket, this was not novel for Pawtucket. 4 years ago, you may recall, there was a highly publicized incident. A kid took a video of an SRO at Tolman High School body slamming another student to the floor. The SRO was removed, and there was all this talk about the need to address this issue, and yet here we are 4 years later dealing with the same thing. They talk about how SROs are not to be disciplinarians. The memorandum of understanding between the school department and the police department talks about it, and yet it's ignored and nothing happens. And it has to change.
What were the consequences for the SROs? I'm sorry if I missed this, but can you just talk about the consequences? Were there any consequences for the SRO that did this, Darren?
No, there wasn't. And I've contacted multiple people. Before I emailed the mayor's office. I've called the school department. I called the police department. I filed a complaint with internal affairs. I followed the things that a regular citizen would think they had to do. I followed chain of command. No one did anything. They told me there was nothing they could do.
And when you went to the school, they said the same thing.
The school was, no, the principal, I'm like, you're the principal. This should be your decision, not his decision. Why is he deciding to make an example out of my child? She comes here under your supervision.
Is he still the SRO there?
Yeah, of course he is. Nothing happened to him.
Can you describe that moment, when you saw your daughter being handcuffed? What goes through a mother's mind?
Honestly, the moment is like, I felt bad for her because I've never even been arrested. Never mind my 13-year-old who never gets into trouble, who never even had a fight. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it puts the parent, me, in an awkward position. And that's another reason why I feel like I needed to speak out. Because, I'm sorry.
No, when you're finished. Go ahead.
Because not only how my daughter felt, but like you said, how did I feel? At that moment, I didn't know how to feel. But when I was waiting at the police station for my daughter to come up for an hour and a half, I'm like, oh, this is not okay. Like, something needs to be done. Because he was too comfortable doing it. To tell me he was going to make an example, how many parents has he told that to?
You took your daughter out of school.
Yes, my daughter refused to go back to school. Okay, she didn't want to be there, which I couldn't blame her. It took me, I don't even know how many days to even convince her to go back. Like, I'm missing days out of work. You know what I'm saying? I'm dealing with the after effects. The school's like, oh, she could talk to somebody here. How? The principal, the person in charge of the school is making her feel like she was at fault. She was wrong. How do you feel comfortable going back there? I had to do what I have to do, pick up another job so I could put my daughter in private school because she would not go back there.
Do you have any other children?
I do.
Are they in school age or?
No, my son, he already graduated.
Okay.
And Treasurer, if you feel comfortable answering this, I know your mom spoke about before how now you feel nervous seeing police officers, and I think that's a really big issue, especially for young people like yourself. They shouldn't feel like that when they come and they see an officer. Can you tell us a little bit about how your perspective changed and maybe how you look at officers differently and how it makes you feel?
I think that when I see officers now, I just try my best to avoid them because I feel like, what if I do something wrong and...
It's okay.
Right. That's okay.
Well, question for Mom. Do you, clearly we're here on MLK Day. She's an African American student. To be blunt, do you think this would have happened to a child of another race?
Honestly, no. And I'll tell you why. Because when your child goes to a school, you receive like emails of things happening around the school, and I've received emails of from the school of things that was happening there. There was a student who threatened to blow the school up or whatever the case may be, and in the email it said, oh, there's nothing to worry about. Pawtucket police checked everything out and he doesn't have any access to weapons. Like, but my kid gets arrested for getting into a little altercation, but nothing happens to him because he was white. So how should I feel about that? Of course I don't want my child attending the same school. Even though it's not the same principal, it's still the same SRO, and he already has a nasty taste in his mouth. So what would you do?
Any other questions?
How is the new
I'm
school?
just gonna add into.
So much better.
Yeah,
But we're still dealing with the after effects from the situation from that school.
right.
Even though it's a different environment, the situation is still there. Like,
And she's still on track academically, still on.
she is still on track academically, that I thank God for, because you know this, I couldn't do it alone. I had to change the school to keep the academic path up.
Yep.
But the emotional is the problem. Like I said, my child wouldn't even go inside the school without other kids for the new school. It puts me in an awkward position because she has so much anxiety. She doesn't want to be around certain adults without people there, other children.
And Treasurer, I don't know if you feel comfortable answering this, but obviously there's going to be a ton of people that see this story. If there's anything you want young people like yourself, a young girl watching this, is there anything you want them to take away from your story?
I don't know.
Maybe after we're done, if she feels more comfortable, we can do it one-on-one. Are there any other questions? All right, we will.
I have a quick question about the public resource officer. So are they, I'm just not so familiar, so are they, he's the one that made the arrest or he called to make the arrest?
The school called him. He made the arrest.
Okay.
And were the charges ultimately dropped?
I had to go to the juvenile hearing board, which in order to even do that, your child has to admit.
Yeah, so the juvenile hearing board, most cities and towns have them, and so that's a process, an alternative to going through family court to deal with the charges, and so they get resolved through there. Kind of more.
And the charges were resolved
Yes.
Okay.
to your satisfaction?
Well, I would say yes, because what would be my other outcome? I don't have, basically that's the only choice you have. there's no other choice.
Like, do they stay on her record or not in juvie?
No, they don't stay on her if she gets in trouble. No, they don't stay on her record unless she gets in trouble again, which the chances of that are like slim to none. She wasn't even a problem child to begin with.
I was gonna ask, she's not a problem child.
No, not by any means.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. We'll keep you posted.
40 days for them to respond. And it's who, the city?
The city of Pawtucket, yeah.